The following review contains significant plot spoilers. Please watch at your own risk.
Backseat driver. White Knight to White Rock. I've evacuated the area. Ask the Admiral where he'd like his bombs delivered.
Tomorrow Never Dies is the 18th official Bond film and was released in 1997, starring Pierce Brosnan as James Bond 007. The film opens up with the usual gun barrel, this time with the traditional music used, and we are treated to an action-packed pre-title sequence which shows Bond at a terrorist arms bazaar on the Russian border. MI6 identifies a wanted American techno-terrorist named Henry Gupta, played by Ricky Jay, who is at the bazaar buying a GPS encoder. MI6 also identifies two Soviet nuclear torpedoes mounted on an aircraft. A huge explosive-ridden firefight takes place in which Gupta escapes with the encoder, and Bond hijacks a jet with the torpedoes and flies off. After the PTS, we get the title song sung by Sheryl Crow. It's a pretty unmemorable song and really doesn't stick out at all. It's sad, too, because there's a song called Surrender, sung by Katie Lang, which was supposed to be the title song but was instead placed in various parts of the film as an instrumental. It's a much better song and even has brass instruments. You'll know the track when you hear it. After the song, we see the main villain of the film, Elliot Carver, played by Jonathan Pryce. Carver is a media baron and head of the Carver Media Group network. He begins his plans to use the encoder to provoke war between China and the UK, which would replace the Chinese government with one more supportive to his plans of exclusive broadcasting rights. Gupta, who works for Carver, uses the encoder to send the British frigate HMS Devonshire off course into Chinese-held waters, where Carver's stealth ship sinks the frigate with a sea drill and steals one of its missiles. Afterwards, Stamper, Carver's right-hand man, played by Gotts Otto, shoots down a Chinese fighter jet and kills the Devonshire survivors with Chinese weaponry. After reading Carver's report of the incident as a Chinese attack, Admiral Roebuck, played by Geoffrey Palmer, deploys the British fleet to recover the frigate and possibly retaliate, leaving M only 48 hours to investigate the sinking. M sends Bond to investigate Carver after Carver Media releases news with critical details hours before these have become known, and MI6 noticed a mysterious signal from one of Carver's satellites when the frigate was sunk. Bond travels to Hamburg, Germany, and seduces Carver's wife, Paris, played by Terry Hatcher, to get information that would help him enter Carver's newspaper headquarters. It is revealed that Bond previously had a relationship with Paris, although this character has never appeared in any Bond film before. Rumor has it that the producers originally wanted Natalia from the previous film GoldenEye to be the wife, but this idea never came to be. Anyways, after Bond sneaks into Carver's newspaper facility and steals the GPS encoder, Carver orders both Paris and Bond to be killed. Paris is killed by a creepy German assassin named Dr. Kaufman, played by Vincent Schiavelli, but Bond kills Kaufman and escapes in his gadget-laden, remote-controlled BMW. One thing I never mentioned in my GoldenEye review is that Brosnan's Bond car is the BMW. Connery, Lazenby, and Dalton all had the Aston Martin, while Moore had the Lotus Esprit. Anyways, there is an awesome car chase in a parking garage, and Bond, of course, escapes unarmed. Bond then goes to the South China Sea to investigate the wreck of the Devonshire, discovering one of the missiles missing. He and Wai Lin, a Chinese spy on the same case played by Michelle Yeoh, are later captured by Stamper and taken to the CMGN Tower in Saigon, where they have a brief confrontation with Carver before escaping in a full-scale motorcycle chase. Bond and Wai Lin agree to work together and contact MI6 about Carver's scheme. The duo later investigate around Halong Bay and find Carver's stealth ship. They board it to prevent him from firing the stolen missile at Beijing. During a struggle, Wai Lin is captured. Bond ends up capturing Gupta to use as his own hostage, but Carver himself kills Gupta, claiming he has outlived his contract. Regardless, Bond of course always has a backup plan, so he detonates an explosive, damaging the ship and making it visible to radar and vulnerable to a subsequent Royal Navy attack. While Wai Lin disables the engines, Bond goes after the missile. He comes across Carver and after a brief talk ends up killing him with his own sea drill. Bond then finds the warhead and attempts to destroy it while Stamper, who has dropped Wai Lin in the ocean in chains, appears and fights him. Bond traps Stamper in the missile firing mechanism and dives down into the water to save Wai Lin, as the missile explodes, destroying the ship and killing Stamper. The film ends with Bond and Wai Lin making love on the wreckage of the ship, as a British Navy ship searches for them. Pierce Brosnan definitely feels more comfortable in the role of James Bond during this film, and gives a solid performance. This is the first of his films in which he portrays what I like to call Super Bond, an indestructible machine gun-toting madman who destroys everything in his way. This is both ridiculous and entertaining at the same time. Regardless, Brosnan manages to pull off some of the more emotional parts of the film quite well. The main villain of this particular Bond film is a very unconventional one. We get a crazy Rupert Murdoch-like media mogul in Elliot Carver, played by the brilliant Jonathan Pryce. A lot of people seem to hate this character, and some even name Carver as one of the more forgettable villains, but I for one loved him. In fact, I like the character of Carver so much that he is my fourth favorite Bond villain. Pryce plays the character over the top and makes him a funny yet serious and menacing baddie. Unfortunately, he doesn't get any fight scenes with Bond, but most of his dialogue in the film makes up for that. M, Moneypenny, and Q all return with memorable scenes and dialogue, so I don't have anything else to say about that aspect. We only get one ally in the film, and that is CIA agent Jack Wade, played again by Joe Don Baker. They kind of brought him up to be a replacement for Felix Leiter, but for some reason this character never appears again after this film. Baker's role in this film is also pretty small, only showing up for maybe 2 minutes of screen time, which is a bit disappointing. There are a few henchmen in this film, those being Stamper, Gupta, and Dr. Kaufman. Stamper is a tall, blonde, indestructible Red Grant clone who apparently feels pleasure when in pain, like in one scene where Bond repeatedly stabs him but he just smiles at it. This gimmick isn't really ever put to good use since this character doesn't really do all that much. Gupta, on the other hand, is a promising but disappointing henchman. Gupta is played by famous sleight-of-hand magician Ricky Jay, which is already a great thing. The only problem is that his character is practically useless. I've seen some deleted scenes with Ricky Jay implementing his card-throwing tricks into the Gupta character, and even one showing him using the cards to slice people, and it surprises me why these scenes were cut. This would have made this character very memorable and unique. Lastly, we have Dr. Kaufman. This character gets one short scene in the entire film, and this short scene happens to be the best part of the whole movie. The scene with him and Bond having a brief confrontation and showing some mutual respect towards each other is just fantastic. The fate of Kaufman is also very well done. And now lastly for the Bond girls. There are two in this film, Wai Lin and Paris Carver. Michelle Yeoh plays Wai Lin and does most of her own stunts, which is pretty sweet. Her character is probably the most badass Bond girl in the whole series since she is also a spy. There's even a whole action sequence with just her beating the crap out of a bunch of guys. On the other hand, Terry Hatcher, who plays Paris Carver, does a pretty terrible job of acting, if you could even call it that, and ends up being slightly annoying. Luckily, she isn't in the film for long. If the producers had gotten Isabella Scorupco back to play Natalia as Carver's wife, then the impact of her death would be much more emotional, since she is a very likable character and we've seen her before. Instead, we just have to settle with Paris. Canadian director Roger Spottiswoode hops into the seat as director and manages to do a great job overall. David Arnold joins as the composer and manages to implement his mark in the Bond films right away with his incredible and memorable music score. Although not quite as good as John Barry, Arnold would soon later become what is most likely the second best Bond composer. The main plot of the film is a bit different for a Bond film with a focus on the media. The villain's scheme is also a bit unusual and odd, and it kind of confuses me why Carver would go through all that work just to cause a war and get more ratings. Nevertheless, I like the media theme. There are plenty of action sequences in this film and much more explosions and gunfire. I don't find the action sequences as great as the ones in GoldenEye, but the Hamburg break-in and the parking garage chase are fantastic. The PTS is also lots of fun. The locations aren't anything too special, with places like Germany and Vietnam, but still manage to be appealing. While Tomorrow Never Dies continues the trend of being a modern Bond film with more focus on action, there are still plenty of things in this film that make it a very enjoyable and great entry in the Bond franchise. I do know that there are many flaws in this film and that it is generally looked upon as one of the weaker films in the series, but I still can't help but enjoy it. That being said, while not one of the best in the series, it is still most definitely lots of fun. Surprisingly, here is my verdict. I give Tomorrow Never Dies an 8 out of 10. Like always, I will go over my likes and dislikes. Jonathan Pryce as Elliot Carver makes a slightly over-the-top and entertaining villain. Michelle Yeoh as Wai Lin is a kick-ass Bond girl. The parking garage car sequence is awesome. I like the whole media theme the film had going. Lastly, the scene between Bond and Dr. Kaufman remains as one of the most tense and best scenes in the whole franchise. Now for my dislikes. The villain's scheme is a bit unplausible and odd. Terry Hatcher as Paris Carver makes one of the worst Bond girls in the series. Elliot Carver's death is too sudden and kinda weak. The character of Gupta doesn't get enough memorable scenes due to the card-related ones being cut. And lastly, the overuse of the James Bond theme in this film gets pretty old fast. Well everyone, that's it for my review of Tomorrow Never Dies. Next week we will analyze a film that I have a very controversial opinion of. Stay tuned for next week when I review The World Is Not Enough.